Hello and welcome to episode 34 of IndieCent, where we are looking at The Hex. It's a really exciting indie game from Daniel Mullins, who you might know as the creator of Pony Island. I can't wait to talk about this one. It's a really interesting, just kind of... Oh, crap. I'm sorry, that's my phone. I have to get this. One sec. Hello? What? Slow down. You're telling me that one of my co-hosts is planning a murder, you say? But which one? Me. Hello?
I'm planning to kill Pro Jared's career.
Too late.
No, but let's be clear. There are plenty of sexual predators who still have work in this industry because everything is terrible. Nick Robinson has 2 million subscribers on YouTube.
Hey, we should know.
Hello and welcome to episode 34 of IndieCent. We're looking at the Hex.
The company that made the new Toe Jam and Earl is hired a sexual predator who was working at the company that made read-only memories. So now I'm never going to play that game again. And also, Toe Jam and Earl can go fuck itself.
Gaming was a mistake.
Video games. We're talking about The Hex.
Yay!
It's a good game.
It is. But before that, we're talking about other stuff.
Alright, let me go ahead and link you the stories in the chat. And we are going to start with the single most important gaming story of all time for us true Doom murderheads. Oh. Sad one. Ladies and gentlemen, Barkley 2 is dead.
No.
We hardly knew ye.
Press F.
For you children who were not around for the greatest vidcom of all time, the original Barkley, aka Tales of Games, presents Chef Boyardee's Barkley Show Up and Jam Gaiden, Chapter 1, the Hoopz Barkley SaGa, which is in canon with Space Jam. That's important you remember that. Was the single greatest RPG ever made. It had chaos dunks in it. It was very good. Though some stuff is aged badly because there's a ghost dad joke and, you know. Homestuck had the same problem. But in all seriousness, that was a pretty funny game I ended up playing one time. There's just so much funny stuff because it was made by 3 dudes on like the Something Awful forums. So, if you dig into the game files, they reused a lot of licensed music and graphics and all that, and they took one of the boss themes from Blue Dragon, and they named it. That's the guy from the Smoke on the Water guy, because it was sung by the guy who's saying "Smoke on the Water."
Ian Blackmore, I think you'll find. Is it the guy from Deep Purple?
Yeah.
Ian Blackmore, I'm pretty sure, or Ian Gillan. It's somebody called Ian.
The song played when you fought the evil cyborg version of one of a famous NBA All-Star and also Michael Jordan in in a fine yellow suit. It was a good video game.
We should
And
pick
for
it.
some... What?
We should pick it one of these days.
Maybe.
Yes.
You were saying... Did anyone else have something to say before I continue? Are we all good?
Kickstarter was a mistake.
No, it wasn't, but in this case it was. So what happened is, I believe it was in 2012, that's why I have in my notes here, the two of the three original guys named Chef and Bort. That's not a joke. Well, they teamed up with some other dude who now apparently owns the Tales of Games branding, and decided to do a Kickstarter to make a sequel called The Magical Realms of Tir na Og, Escape from the Necron 7 Revenge of Cthulhu, the official VidCon of the movie Chapter 2 of the Hoopz Barkley saga. They actually said game, but I changed it to VidCon because that is canon, and it ended up raising about $120,000. And it was an ambitious game from what they pitched, saying that this it would be a sequel to the cult classic VidCon I've already told you all about, and would have a large open cyberpunk basketball themed world where things would change over time, have fast-paced action RPG combat, a Borderlands style gun loot system, trancing in the famous dwarf net used by the dwarves and various dwarf enthusiasts, and of course, edutainment. There's also a chart on the Kickstarter that tried to sell you that this was a game for true doom murderheads by listing out various other games and saying if they were for stoner, corporate attitude, trend, or true doom murderheads, and this was the only game for true doom murderheads, and they lied to us because it doesn't exist. I am upset.
I'm getting the feeling generally that Kickstarter is not good for sort of, indie games. If you've got something like, obviously the biggest example probably is Shenmue 2, which got, I think, is Shenmue 2 now the highest Kickstarted game ever?
That is not an indie game.
I know, exactly, and this is the thing. Basically, if you already have funds to make the game, great. If you're trying to do a game from scratch, not so great, as exemplified by the Homestuck game.
That's not the problem here. You would think that's the problem here, but it's not, because it turns out the main two guys managed to make a lot of the game. The problem is, the third guy, who was not the original guy, one of the original three, was terrible at managing a studio because he was an SA chucklefuck who didn't know what he was doing, and bad things followed. It turns out when you had let shitposters make a commercial video game and try to actually pay employees, things go badly. From what I can gather, they did use some of that Kickstarter money to pay for salaries plus some convention fees. Like a third of it was for convention fees and 2/3 were for salaries. But they also promised stakes in the game sales when it finally released, like they used to do way back in the old days, like in the era of Doom and Duke Nukem and all that, when teams were small. But the problem is, devs just kept leaving the project because it was so poorly managed. There were like tons, nobody had any idea of where they were going with something, so they would just end up doing something halfway and abandoning it. Management didn't understand how game dev worked because that third guy I keep mentioning, turns out he doesn't have game development experience. He's just the PR guy. So that's not good. And it's just one big mess. We're learning all this from one of the third actual developer of the original Barkley, who calls himself Horatio, and he went on the Something Awful forums to just air out everything that was going on now that he's finally left the project. And it's effectively dead, even though there's like 2 people left who have not been working full-time for years, just part-time on this, and they're trying to find new hires, and they're probably not going to get it because, they don't have any money. So, yeah.
Isn't Something Awful technically dead anyway?
Nope.
Oh god, Something Awful's still going? Bloody hell.
It'll never die.
Oh.
Let's see. What else do we have here?
At least my Online was good.
I also compared this to the development of the famous the crime film Food Fight, and by crime film I mean the crime against film.
Oh.
Because the director for that movie also didn't work in animations, so of course he would just say things like, make it 20% more awesome. So this is what we were dealing with, except this time the guy in charge was a shitposter.
To be fair, the entire history of Food Fight is itself probably worthy of a film, because at one point the entire, not just the actual, obviously the negatives, but the entire machinery for making Food Fight was stolen. Like the entire.
And what's funny, this is almost a similar situation, because as it turns out, with Horatio leaving and one other guy who left with him, Lazarul, they were the last two people who understood how the game actually functioned at this point. So even if they get more people to work on this, they have no idea how to break down to the core of what this game is, so they can't build on it properly. Hooray!
Hooray!
I think this is just Project Fear, and it's going to be great.
Yeah. What's going to happen is LeBron's gonna obviously throw money at it now, because LeBron's already got an Oscar. He clearly wants something video game related now.
I honestly don't know what we're going to do to ever get a game for True Doom Murderheads. It's just not going to happen.
You got Shaq Fu 2.
Don't ever talk about that game ever again.
You got Shaq Fu 3.
What's Shaq Fu?
What? I don't want to know. But yeah, this was a pretty sad story. There are a lot of indie studios that actually do complete their Kickstarters, but then you have situations like this, and it's just sad. And then what's sad about it is it's not even for understandable reasons. It's because the person in charge of the whole project was not cut out to lead a project like this. And also, none of us actually wanted things like the open world or the Borderlands gun system. We just wanted the jokes and the Dorfnet. That's all we wanted. But nope.
Nope. This is where we can't have nice things.
And then we get to the second story, which, of course, brings us back to the Epic Store.
What have Epic done now?
Okay, so the Epic Store debacle has to do this time with their first sale, in which they discounted everything on their store and decided they were going to eat the cost of this, and so the devs wouldn't be affected. The problem is, they either didn't tell any of the developers, or they told them very poorly, and this resulted in two big games getting pulled from the service temporarily, because those games weren't out yet. They're supposed to be for pre-order, and people would end up pre-ordering them for cheaper than normal, and that would cause issues later on, because it would affect what people saw the value of the games as. And this got especially bad for the developers doing the game Hades. They're the people who made Oxenfree, I believe. Or is this one of those Supergiant games? I forget.
Hades is a Supergiant game.
Okay, I thank you for clarifying that. What game are the Oxenfree people working on? Oh, whatever, I'll find that out later. But their game...
That was ages ago, I'm sorry. No, I got the wrong game.
Okay, well, anyways, they didn't remove their game because, they're an indie studio. But what they did was they jacked up the main price to $25, so the sell price would still be around a price where, like, the value of their game for people first seeing it wouldn't be $5. Oh boy. Well, $7 actually, but that's still really bad for indies. Because if you do too many sales, people will just eventually figure that your game is worth a lot less than it's actually worth. So, which is why it's important to tell the developers in putting games on your store that you're doing this, so they can choose to opt out if they want to. Oh, it was just one giant mess. And this and you have to keep in mind that the Epic Store also just uniformly uses USD. There is no regional currency calculations or anything like that, which means certain areas of the world would have very different views of the pricing of these games, especially in Russia, which could cause some potential problems with Russian sales regulations. So yeah, Epic has no idea what they're doing, and they're just going to keep pouring more money and until they take over the PC gaming market, because everything is terrible.
Didn't this also the sale in which... Sorry.
Oh,
is it?
One more thing. This came out thanks to Pat from the former Best Friends tweeting about it. He tried to get like 5 games from the sale, since there were games he was planning on getting anyways that were exclusive to the store. And because there's no shopping cart still, he had to get them all one at a time in quick succession, which triggered fraud alarm. And remember, this is a big sale, the first big sale the store's had, where you're expecting a lot of people to buy a lot of games because they're all on discount, and you don't have a shopping cart, so people can't do it without triggering the fraud detection, and that had to be fixed later.
Spectacular.
And,
you buy too many games, as you get banned.
Given that Steam was so just like incredibly shitty at everything they do, in a weird way it's nice that like these Epic Game Store rolls into town on a motorbike, and then they like, hey, you don't have to go to Steam anymore, you've got us, and then they just like trip and fall into a ravine.
But it doesn't matter, because they're just going to keep buying games away from the competition.
Yeah. I will start to probably hate them once they successfully get Steam shut down or something, and I lose all of my Roller Coaster Tycoon hours.
Oh, I hate them already. Fuck Epic, especially because they have, guess what? They're another company with crunch. Welcome to hell. Welcome to hell. Oh, and also, Tencent owns 40% of the company, which also terrifies me, so. Video games.
I genuinely didn't know about that last bit. Like this. Just, hey, we got a sale. It's $10 off all of our games. Buy as many as you want. And then you buy 2. They're like, what the fuck you playing at? What is this? What are you up to? Little conniving shit.
Epic will exist until they realise that sort of Europe is impossible to sell video games in anymore, because everyone insists on putting loot crates and everything.
Bad things are bad.
Gaming was a mistake. Anyway, what have we been playing this
Danny,
week?
do you also agree that everything is ruined forever?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's just go ahead and get to what we've been playing. Let me go ahead and set up the timer. Who wants to go first?
Oh, why not?
Alright, Toma, go for it.
I've been playing one game this time. Well, actually, quite a few games, but mostly one. I've been playing Final Fantasy 15.
Way!
And
Have you found the Mahjong yet?
I have not. 15. Not 14. 15.
Oh.
It's better than I
I'm
expected.
sorry.
It's better than I expected. I have been playing 14 as well, but to be honest, I've talked about 14 for about the last 2 episodes, and to be honest, it's
sorry.
It just continues to be. Oh, don't worry, I played Final Fantasy 9 as well, so I've been actually playing a good game. That's what it's about. The thing I feel about 15 is, oh my god, the problem with 15 is fairly obvious. Square Enix clearly, this makes me very, very worried for the Final Fantasy VII remake. I have a problem with sort of doing games that sort of are, a complete whole thing. I mean, you look at other companies, you look at, for example, I don't know, let's take something like... Well, this is the thing. Part of Square Enix seems very bad at making games that are like a complete thing. You look at the other half of Square Enix, the sort of the half that basically are putting out the games that play like the older Final Fantasy. So we're talking Bravely Default, Octopath Traveler. They're brilliant. They're ticking over. They're probably making Square Enix equal amount of money as these AAA sort of monoliths that sort of they roll out every 5 or 6 years. The problem is with 15, don't get me wrong, playing 15 is enjoyable. It's a nice game. I like the real time stuff. There's enough of the sort of the basically. I find the whole sort of it's not turn based, so it now sucks sort of view of Final Fantasy a little bit redundant. You've got to remember the last truly turn based Final Fantasy game was Final Fantasy X, and that's like 15, 16 years ago now, if not longer. And you're looking at it and you go, well, you can't have turn-based 3D, hyper-realistic game, because it just looks odd. You got like a conga line of people standing there going, we're just going to take turns to fight, because it's an old system. It's a system basic when games did not have enough system memory to do, real-time fights. And even if you look at stuff like the early Tales games, where there is real time inside, obviously, a sort of a fight sort of thing. So I get that people obviously get annoyed with that part of 15 because it's such a break from and it plays honestly more like Kingdom Hearts. Where my biggest problem with 15 is the plot.
Well, duh, it technically wasn't finished at first.
It's not it's still not finished. 15 will never be finished. The main guy who did a lot of 15 left Square Enix. We're never getting two bits of the game. Which is just like, that's the problem. You haven't finished the game. So now you're never going to be able to finish the game. If that makes sense. Yeah. And even okay, don't get me wrong, the characterization in 15 is very good. They are enjoyable characters to be around. But the problem is, what they're actually doing is like, I am 12 or 13 hours in, I have basically been wandering around for, I would say, half of that. Just basically goofing off. And don't get me wrong, I get that a lot, obviously it being an open world game, there is more ability to do that. And I know obviously, you take, for example, the two key the three key open world games, obviously the Elder Scrolls series and obviously Fallout, Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead. Absolutely, there is the temptation to, go off and just bugger them out for 20 hours. But the plot of the Grand Theft Auto and the plot of Red Dead is ancillary. I don't think people are playing, okay, there are probably players who play Grand Theft Auto for the plot, but they're not going to be, the majority of people. And if you compare it, I think the game I will probably most compare, and most contrast, and most critique Final Fantasy 15 against is actually probably something like Breath of the Wild, where the game is. I want to say less. How would I put this? No, for example, you have a quest line in Final Fantasy in Zelda. It will be okay. The game is sort of gently leading you to it. In 15, it's sort of like here's a quest over here. Here's where you go to continue the plot, rather than sort of if you go to this place in Breath of the Wild, it'll be like okay, now you can meet some characters, and now you can, because the whole plot of Breath of the Wild is about discovery and about self-discovery. Whereas with 15, it's just like here, do some stuff. Expand the plot. The plot that half of it is missing anyway because it's stuffed off in a CGI film. It's like, you want to see the fall of this kingdom? You've got to shell out 15 quid to watch this. You want more backstory about these four? You've got to go and watch the anime. You want to find out more about the main villain? Congratulations, you got to buy a novel. And it's that attitude that really starts to annoy me. with Square Enix as of late, because, or at least the half of Square Enix, because even if you go back to 13's plot is all in the menu. You've got to go in and look at these data logs, and these data logs will fill out background, and that is really start. And I can understand why, because I've got a friend, and she is the die hardest of Final Fantasy fans, and she won't play this game because it doesn't feel like a Final Fantasy game, and that's what I've been playing this week.
Yep.
It's a perfect road trip simulator, and I love it.
With pretty boy band people.
Yeah, boy band on a road trip.
You just
Going
don't have
camping.
to think about it.
Just camping
Just
with
turn
the
your
boys.
brain off.
And a guy in a
Turn
hat.
your brain off.
And a guy with a hat. Everybody loves the guy with a hat.
Alright, who wants to go next?
I'll go next.
Alright.
Last time on the last episode, I talked about a game that I didn't say much about it. But I said I was currently reviewing a game, and since then my review for it has gone up. I reviewed Super Dragon Ball Heroes World Mission, which was it's the very first release of the Super Dragon Ball Heroes card game in the West, which is a digital card game that could previously only be found in like Japanese 3DS games, or in most prominently in arcades, where you buy real packs of cards and then use those cards on the arcade machines. But now it's here on PC and Switch.
Ooh.
Check out my full review of it. Spoilers, I loved it. Also spoilers, no one else is playing it, which means I'm going to play against, and I'm very sad, because the few times I got to play against people, it was really fun, and helped me helped me actually learn some competitive, helped me refine my deck more competitively. So yeah, you can check out my review on that. Aside from that, I'm somehow just still stuck in the NBA 2K19 hole. That's all I played.
Danny.
What team are you playing as, Danny, out of interest?
I've been kind of trying, just been cycling whenever I get bored of one mode with one team. Whenever I get bored of one My League mode, I'll just start a new one with another team.
Danny.
Right now I'm actually doing the My GM mode and trying to mess around with the sliders enough. I like how they have the sliders to let you... they have a lot of really in-depth customization sliders.
Danny,
for how you
NBA
want to
is killing you.
The Raptors won that first game. They just... And they held their own against the Warriors in the last one, but their defense has been really good, but their offense just shit the bed in that second half last night.
This is an interesting question.
They got a lot of people injured in this series. It's gonna be weird. Obama was at the game last night.
Do you find it actually more interesting to play a sports game if you actually follow the sport yourself? Because I've sort of been vaguely tempted to buy one of the NHL hockey games, because I don't actually, obviously, I do follow ice hockey and I don't get to watch it much because it's usually on at 3 o'clock in the morning my time.
I think I do. It was kind of getting back into NBA 2K that sort of got me following basketball again. Those, I guess, kind of went hand in hand, but the NBA 2K came first. But yeah, because what I like about the NBA 2K games is just basically using that. What I like about, sports games in general is the fan fiction I create out of them. Just because I go into the My League, My GM modes, I take over a team, and I'm making all the decisions around it. I can, I get to decide the direction of the team. I can make my own new team and insert them into the league, see how they do.
Danny, you could just go play XCOM.
I can do fantasy drafts just to, okay, what if we even all the teams out and then just draft everyone in the league again? And so I can get, like right now I'm working with, Giannis Antetokounmpo, one of the best players in the league, and I got him on the Raptors now with Eric Bledsoe and JJ Redick and Steven Adams, And
Danny, can't you see this NBA Jam game is killing you?
Well, not NBA Jam, because this doesn't have
whatever.
aggressive rubber banding. But yeah, I'm still having a lot of fun with it. I already know I'm gonna be buying NBA 2K20 when it launches, unless they do some like really aggressive changes to my favorite modes. I have a feeling that the VC, the virtual currency stuff that I bought cheaply on sale, I have a strong feeling none of it's going to carry over into the next game. Anyways, sports games need that to stay afloat, though, apparently. That was such a bad article. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go next real quick.
Please edit out all my Please edit out all my coughs.
Never.
I keep trying to turn around, but the mic's still picking it up really loudly.
This is not a professional podcast.
Oh, it's going to be so gross. I'm sorry, everyone.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go. I got 4 games to talk about, but it'll be fairly quick. So I replayed World of Goo in order to get images for it and write a piece for Hardcore Gaming 101, because for some reason we still didn't have an article on what's arguably one of the most important indie games ever made, go figure, and it was a good time to do it because they released a free HD update patch that makes the game not look like complete crap on PCs now, and it's still World of Goo and very good, and I would recommend it if you haven't played it yet. Or I would recommend playing it again if you have played it before, because it's really good. And you should also look into the Wii U, was it the Wii U version or Switch version? Switch version, that's right. Because it brings back a multiplayer mode that used to be exclusive to the Wii version that you can no longer buy. And apparently there are improvements to it, so look into that. I started a game called Aquaria, which is an earlier game from the guy who went on to make Spelunky. That indie game that's apparently really popular, but no one seems to really care about, so... I appreciate what it's trying to do. It's basically an undersea Zelda-like, and it has some really interesting mystery-building stuff, some good puzzles, and interesting combat ideas, but it's not hooking me, and it's not because I don't recognize it as a good game, but it's just not like a game for me. Especially when I'm already replaying. I replayed a bit of Dex this weekend just to unwind my brain, since it has a very simple feedback loop, and I'm getting more enjoyment from that game. It's very similar with all the exploration. There's just less puzzles and more punching dudes to death, which I appreciate more. I played through the Frame games for an article commission, and I like them. I did give up on the second one because it relied too much on shifting around the panels in real time, which fried my brain. But I do appreciate them a lot. They were actually, I remember Zoe Quinn actually wrote for the first game, and Hideo Kojima decided it was his favorite game of that year, so, maybe play it. You can get 1 and 2 Together's collection on Steam right now and other platforms. They're really interesting puzzle games based around organizing comic panels, and I've never seen a game use the language of comics like this before, so it's really fascinating to just experience once at least, even if you don't really care for it. I would say look it up. And the 4th game is I reinstalled Love Nikki Dress Up Queen.
Dark.
Yeah.
This is an intervention, Dark. Enough with the princess dress-up game.
Hey, I'm not the one who's playing the basketball game with the loot boxes.
It would be better if you were playing the basketball game.
Honestly, it's pretty good. Still holds up.
He's too far gone.
What's wrong with liking a dress-up game?
We'll remember him while he was alive.
No, seriously, I don't get it. What's wrong with liking a dress-up game?
I can still hear his voice.
What were those DS dress-up games that were apparently really good?
I think it was Style something. I don't remember.
Style Savvy?
That's it.
That's the one.
Love Nikki's Eye is probably the only single phone game with like little microtransaction stuff in there that I genuinely enjoy, because all the microtransaction stuff is so far to the side because the game gives you so much shit. Not as much as Grand Blue, obviously, but it still gives you enough that I don't mind. And it's just kind of fun to go through it and find more stuff and just keep them. It gives you a lot of options for all sorts of wild outfits. I like it a lot because it has a lot of options. It has a really good art style, this sort of shoujo anime thing going on, and there are actually a lot of unisex options, so you can make girls who look like pretty boys, and that's cool. So yeah, it's pretty fun. It's definitely better than pretty much any other dress-up game you're ever going to find on mobile, because it's not cynical cash-in garbage. They actually put effort into it and update it a lot with and have regular events. It's worth a look, I'd say, if you're into that sort of thing, and I kind of am. I like fashion. Fight me, nerds. And that is it for me. Let's let Elmo finish this.
Yay!
No!
My brain is frozen. Okay, so I know the thing that I don't mention, but
out of context humor.
Yes, but the rest is still. I wrote some stuff for Hardcore Gaming 101, and it was really cool. And Dark set me up with it, and I wrote a thing about a game, and it's like I got paid money, and oh my god, that's so awesome! And it was, you said that you didn't have a World of Goo article. You didn't have Papers, Please. Or The Binding of Isaac. Or Evo
I tried
Land.
Papers, Please, but you know how I feel about that game.
Turns out getting paid to write about something you're already doing is kind of cool.
And I'm working now on Limbo and Gunpoint. It's awesome. I love it. It hasn't... I'm gonna wake up one day and I'm gonna suddenly hate it and be like, ugh, just part of the Monday to Friday 9 to 5, but I haven't hit that point yet. I'm loving it. It's amazing. It's great.
Just be careful not to suggest covering games like Sleeping Dogs or the first 3 games in the Borderlands series. I'm actually almost done with the Borderlands one, but Christ, that took forever.
The worst thing that I did, the only thing about it that I didn't like was because I volunteered to do The Binding of Isaac and Rebirth, and I am exactly the kind of arsehole who would read an article on The Binding of Isaac and look through the pictures and be like, here, there are 2 pictures here that were clearly taken from the same run at different points. That's very lazy. They should have put more variety in. So I hate myself. And I played a bunch of Binding of Isaac ones. And also, I'm talking like the original Binding of Isaac. And going back to the original after playing like 600 hours of Rebirth is not good. But anyway, it's great, and I love it. It's fantastic. Crap, what else have I done? Oh, I actually have played 2 games. One of them is named The Sun and Moon. One of the things I found out when I was writing about Evoland, there's this game jam thing named Ludum Dare, and they're responsible for a lot of famous indie games. So Evoland, Broforce, there was one other that I forgot, and The Sun and Moon. It's a retro platformer kind of along the lines of Meat Boy or The End Is Nigh. It has kind of one gimmick where you can travel through the ground and fly up to do massive jumps. It's cool, and I like it, and it's good, and I like how you get like bronze, silver and gold medals for doing the levels in enough time, and there's achievements for getting like 100 levels bronze, and I assumed that there would only be 100 levels in the game, but there's not, it's 150, so you don't actually have to 100% more, which is good because it's really difficult. Oh, and my best friend bought an old laptop that still has Windows 98 on it, so I've been using it to play Blades of Exile, which is an old Spiderweb software game. It's one of those games where the devs are like giving it away for free on their site now because it doesn't run on any other computer and they can't really sell it. But yeah, it's like 25 years old, or as Pro Jared would say, too old. Because, get it? He's a paedophile. So, seriously, Jared, what the fuck? But yeah, Blades of Exile is great. It's what I imagine like an old top-down Elder Scrolls game would be like. I don't know. I've never played any Elder Scrolls game. It has big fantasy worlds.
They're all bad.
Fantasy creatures. I feel bad because Spiderweb remade these Exile games. There's like 4 of them, and they remade them all as Avernum. But they're in isometric, and they don't look as good. And so they're still doing games that you can go out and play, but I would rather just play the stuff they're giving away for free on their website. So, and the last thing, I'm sorry, Dark, because you don't have to like put this in like you did with the whole episode for art school. But after I did Bort Samson in art school, I did immediately go back into art school and start drawing the rest of the Samson
I'm not going to
family.
put it in.
You don't have to. That's good. But yeah, I just wanted to share them with you anyway. This is what art school does. It just makes you enjoy reading. Did I say reading? What's wrong with me? Makes you enjoy drawing. Okay, so there's the dad Hummer Samsung. He's very good.
Oh. Bayless did a video of bootleg Simpsons toys this week, and I would highly recommend you all go check out the last 2.5 minutes of it, because the skit is amazing.
Morg.
Morg.
Eggs make for good sustenance.
Here's Leela.
That stopped being funny because now I kind of hate Aaron Hansen.
Yeah.
Oh.
Remind me knowledge.
And this is by...
So I thought I could make my voice higher.
Oh, that's pretty good. Well, this one is the baby Maggie, so you can hear this one.
Okay, Elmo, I'm gonna have to ask you to never play Art School ever again.
I think we should play Art School
You offended me.
Nobody will ever know what we're looking at.
Every time we have like a year-end review, we should all do Art School again. All of us. Yes. More Art School.
No.
I don't have any time left, do I?
30 seconds.
My best friend played Alan Wake. I like it. Dark likes it. He didn't like it, and it's okay because he's my best friend.
You can go to hell.
But also, he's one of the few people where him like shouting about games on the internet is genuinely really funny, and he just keeps going like, "Why was everyone in the spooky woods? Why didn't every level was just Alan going back, finding an excuse to go back into the spooky woods? And why were there? Well, the bad guys, were they just living in the spooky woods before they died, and that's why everyone's there, and the city's empty because everyone's just out in the fucking woods?" It was. I love him and I love Alan Wake, and it's all good.
Alright, and that is what we've been playing. Let's go ahead and get into our main discussion with the Hex. Spoiler alert, everyone, I really like this game. Did you know? Bet
Just
you
a little
did.
bit.
I could have guessed.
I have no idea how we even start talking about the Hex.
Spec Ops The Line 2.
Alan Wake 2. No, Alan Wake 3. There's already a 2. But yeah, as Elmo mentioned, the Hex is a game from Daniel Mullins and his friends who previously did Pony Island, which was also an extremely meta game, but in a way not a lot of people were expecting, because the joke with Pony Island was that it was a parody of the type of games that were coming out then, following the fad of Undertale, of trying to be more surprising than you would expect. And the big surprise in Pony Island, that it was a big giant shitpost where Satan was a terrible game developer who loved ponies, and at one point you killed Jesus, and then the game flashes on the screen, you killed Jesus.
It also
was very
flashes,
silly.
you don't kill Jesus if you don't, and you get a bonus ticket.
That's great. But it was also notable because there was kind of an endless hole you could dive into, because there was so much meta stuff around the game that you could dig into. I think there were some like extra games outside of it that it would lead you to, sort of like Frog Fractions. And so I was very interested in seeing what these guys would do again, and I haven't heard anything for a while. And then Jim Sterling was talking, put a video up for a game called The Hex I had never heard of, and then he said it was from the Pony Island guy. I was like, why the fuck did I not hear about that? And I was surprised to learn that other actual indie devs were surprised to learn when I told them that this game was from the Pony Island guys, because they didn't know. So that's interesting.
It's also kind of sad. Pony Island is really good, I love it, but it's like 2 hours. And it's good for like a 2-hour joke.
Honestly,
and
I
the
kind
Hex
of...
is like so... the Hex is the one that deserves to go in history books.
Well, the thing is, I think that's kind of how they won it, because of just the particular type of meta this game ends up being. It's better if you just go in not knowing what you're in for. Because unlike Pony Island, which was a massive shitpost, this is built up with actual intrigue for people who are new, and as partly a joke for people who are familiar with Pony Island to catch them off guard. And it's probably one of the most interesting meta games I've ever played. Like, even more interesting than Undertale, which had a very interesting idea and hook to it. But this goes in a very different kind of more... how do I put this? Like, it's less interested in examining you as a person playing the game, and more interested in examining the wider ideas of a self-aware world would bring. And it's actually kind of horrifying at times, even though you wouldn't expect it, because there are parts in this game that are just ridiculously silly, like the cursing alligator or crocodile. And all his curses are bleeped in the text, and you hear little bleeps on screen, and it's funny. I think he calls you a fuck or something. But anyways, the basic premise is that 6 video game characters are gathered together at a bar called an inn called the Six Pint Inn, run by an old man in a wheelchair. Said man, who you actually get to control at the beginning of the game. This is important. Take a note of it. It's an interesting bit where you just set up game settings, if I remember correctly, and then he gets a phone call suggesting that one of the 6 characters is planning a murder, and he announces it to everyone, and this begins the basic premise, where you go throughout the hotel as the 6 different characters over time, and learn more about the secrets of the hotel, and play through flashbacks with these characters and learn more about them. And it goes to some wild places, some very, very wild places. The 6 characters in question are Weasel Kid, a parody character of Sonic the Hedgehog, who you get to go through his the 3 games in his series and their eventual decline. There's Bryce, who calls himself a chef but appears to be a fighting game character. Chandralay, who's from an adventure RPG, sort of like Zelda mixed with Final Fantasy. Russ, someone who doesn't seem to be aware that he is a video game character from some sort of Fallout-like game. Lazarus, a space marine, and question mark. A character with seemingly no name or even face, who everyone has a different idea of what they are, like the random entrepreneur in a fighting game, or maybe like the main character of a first-person adventure or something. That turns out to be accurate. You end up playing through all 6 of their various games, with a unified control scheme with the WASD keys and the mouse, and the genre of each game changes constantly, so it's playing with your expectations while using that simple control scheme to always keep you on a certain level where you understand what you need to do at any given time in order to just, basically control the game. And, on a game design level, that unified control scheme is kind of amazing. I am really impressed they pulled something like that off. It's just you look at modern games and all the buttons they use, and it's and try to give you all these tutorial messages, and this makes it so simple. And it does so much with that simple control scheme. It's wild.
I feel kind of silly all of a sudden, because I was like, I'm going to pick the Hex because it's a fantastic game, and I can't wait to talk about it. And now I realise that so much of this game is oh, so there's this bit? Actually, I'd much rather you just played it yourself and saw this bit.
Well, we're going to have a really busy spoiler section.
Yeah.
I have some mixed feelings on it, honestly. Which most of it comes probably from the fact that I think I chose the wrong choice when I wasn't supposed to.
Did you get the true ending?
No. It came to a part where it was since we're not in spoilers yet, I'm just gonna say it comes to a part where it's does this ending satisfy you? And I said yes. And then I was like, okay. And then the game ended, and I was like, huh. I don't think
Please go look up the true ending on YouTube right now, Danny, so when we get to that, because we're all going to talk about it, and I don't want to spoil it for you. You need to go see that right now.
I forgot. When does it say, are you satisfied with this ending?
I can't say because spoilers.
Oh, wait, I think that's after the 5th chapter. You didn't even get to the walkabout game, did you?
No. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, boy.
So yeah, I feel like I don't get the game is the problem. I'm not sure what it was trying to be or say. But,
Danny, I'm going to have so many words when we get to the spoiler section.
And I'm looking forward to finding out what the game's actually about. But yeah, I guess most of the game, as obvious as it might sound, a lot of the game wasn't particularly fun, I would say, to play. It wasn't very fun or challenging, except for a couple different sections where I was like, this is actually kind of neat, I guess. One which
mainly
is
in Chapter 5, I'm guessing.
I can't remember which one that was. But
it was the top-down shooter that kind of bent around all the time.
Yeah, the twin stick shooter section, and but also the tactics one, where you're having.
Oh yeah.
Where
you're go on.
One, it was just a cool setup and actually kind of fun puzzle, but also the extra mechanic it adds in that I can't get into because spoilers. Having it add that in and having to use those to actually solve the puzzles was really neat. I actually really enjoyed that.
I can see where you're going from, because the first 3 chapters are on the shorter side and are mainly there to set up stuff that's going to happen in the last 3.
I also don't think this game was made with the intention of being fun first.
Oh yeah, no, it was made for the intention of the whole experience.
A lot of it was sort of almost a meta-narrative about not only the evolution of video games, but sort of how, I suppose, the genreification of video games, and at the end of the day, to draw a comparison, and obviously I've drawn a comparison to this work in particular before, it sort of reminded me in places of sort of the work of Samuel Beckett and obviously Tom Stoppard's Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead, wherein basically you are, you don't think about sort of how, characters in a play sort of react to being characters in a play. So, it's sort of an interesting, obviously, you can see a similar view taken in, bizarrely enough, Wreck-It Ralph, the Disney film. In other words, what does a villain do when a villain of a video game when a villain isn't being a villain. You know, does the fact that a character is, you know, oh, you're a villain, you know, you're coded as a villain, you're sort of, you know, you're basically your job in life is to oppose a hero, and we see this sort of several times in the Hex through various characters. But obviously, you know, well, what if a character, you know, for example, what if a character is sick of being, you know, the constantly occurring boss, you know, the first major boss in a video game, and wants to go, hang on a minute, you know, I have, you know, aspirations, and I have sort of things. It sort of takes a very, I won't say sort of almost sort of anti-nihilistic approach, you know, that you've got to remember in video games, you know, even sort of things like Mario and Sonic, which obviously the first level of the game sort of concentrates upon, you're killing people. You're killing people. You're sort of, you know, or a character that's assisting you. You're wearing down on that character. You know. It does a very, very interesting thing with a couple of its characters. You know, the idea of you know, in a recurring series, you know, maybe the characters are getting bored of being, you know, saving the world all the time, and you're going through the same paces. And obviously, if you compare that back to the sort of the narrative, the meta narrative of sort of things like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, you know, where do your characters actually have free will? And obviously free will is a major thing that the Hex does go on to concentrate upon. But it sort of approaches video gaming in a very, you know, meta-narrative style, you know, talking about, you know, well, what is, you know, do video gaming characters indeed have free will?
I think the most interesting part of the concept is Chapter 4 in the Waste World segment where you're controlling Rust, because that is about a game that was technically never finished, and now you're experiencing it as modders have basically taken control of it to try and finish it. And what is resulting is basically an endless psychological horror segment the further it goes on. I was kind of floored by by the ending of that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was really good.
Oh, absolutely. The way that sequence plays with sort of, you know, the very nuts and bolts of video gaming, you know, for example, you know, the way that obviously code works, and, you know, the way that even character models, because that section very neatly swaps things around, and sort of actually, it's probably one of the best examples I've ever seen in a video game of sort of how, you know, insanity is.
You get an achievement in all of the different sections of the game for encountering a glitch that makes the game fake crash and then close. I love that.
I like how they all kind of make sense within the context of the genre. Like, to get the fighting game one, you have to get the combo meter so ridiculously high that it crashes the game, for example.
No, that's two different ones, because that's one thing. Every gameplay segment has two achievements, and one of them is by doing something that's impressive within the realms of the game, like getting a really high combo. And the other one is by encountering a glitch. The glitch in the fighting game segment is if you enter the Konami code.
Oh yeah, that's right.
If you put the Konami code
and there's
Jesus Christ.
And of course there's also the hidden move where you can get the alligator after it leaves the field, where you can do a slide kick by pressing B on your keyboard and down and go over there and hit him off screen.
Don't tickle the mountain's chin. That just sounds weird.
The people who made this know video games, and they actually did something really interesting with the concept of video games. And I do like that as you go throughout the game, the mystery theme is still being built up because there's a lot of intrigue of what's happening. Because you get fed little bits of info. And Danny, I'm honestly wondering why you would select yes after what happened at the end of that chapter 5, because there are just so many questions, even if you didn't go into the vending machines for extra info, that are left unanswered by what you just saw. Like, particularly, what's with the cloaked guy who's in the Weasel Kid sections, for example? Like, you actually have to select you're not satisfied with that ending to figure out what all that's about. And it goes in some wild directions, but it's interesting because it keeps throwing out red herrings and keeping you suspicious of the characters because you don't really understand what any of them actually want the more you and as you go along. And when you think you figure something out, something else gets explained as you're exploring the inn as another character. Like, one character won't know anything about what appears to be a blood stain, and another character, and the character who left that stain points out that it's just pie he was making earlier, for example. And it keeps things interesting enough that as you go through all the memories and try to piece together what's actually happening, there's also a lot of background lore building, like Lionel, the person who seems to be responsible for all of these game characters existing, with like a hint that he sold out his characters to this big company that ended up ruining Weasel Kid, for example, or other questionable decisions, like when you find out that Bryce really was a chef character in a cooking game until Lionel, for some reason, acquired the rights to him and put him in his fighting game. And there's all sorts of little things like that building before everything just kind of comes together in the final chapter.
You know why I said it was satisfying?
Why?
Because I didn't think it would actually end the game.
You could have just reloaded the game and it would let you start up before that happened. There are dozens of joke endings in the games that you can just reload right before you got them and then keep going.
I had other stuff to do.
Please go look up that ending while we're talking and watch it. Please. I really don't want to spoil what happens.
I do like at least that there are enough big old fourth wall breaks that even though I said, I'd really rather everyone just experience them themselves, there's still, like, we could still talk about a major fourth wall break in every single mini game, and there would still be so many great surprises left.
And like the one that instantly caught my attention was that the game, just like Pony Island and its like most famous puzzle, it ended up using the fact that it's a Steam game to its advantage by faking the Steam overlay appearing, but wherein it tried to trick you in Pony Island, here it throws out this element that you were expecting in a surprising way, where the reviews of Weasel Kid, which were apparently done by your actual people on your Steam's friends list, are popping up and becoming platforms for you, which gets twisted around as the reviews become more negative and slowly disappear after you step on them. Which, that's interesting.
I felt kind of hurt when that came up with you. Because, I was playing, I think, the second Weasel Kid game. And lots of people were like, yeah, I love it. Ooh, Weasel Kid. And then I just saw, like, Darkside says, I don't like this game. And I was like, whoa, what the hell, Dark? This is a fine game. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, for the second one, of course, we have Sado. Sado is a reoccurring boss, in quotations I say, in this game. We'll get more into him or her in spoilers. I think it's her. But basically Sado is this sort of clown character who can take on the speech patterns of other characters, and all speech in this game, except for in Chapter 6, is done through little video text coming up, bubble sounds. And Sado screws around with the game interfaces and forces you into weird situations like playing a find the thing under the hat game in the middle of a fighting game, or just all the shit that happens in Chapter 4 and 5, which I'm not even going to get into here because wow. But there are like all sorts of moments like that where you think you figured out the game and it's like, nope.
It's what I was thinking of when I was thinking about the fourth wall break in the second chapter. And even though it's not a fourth wall break, just the fact that your officially stated goal is, I don't want to be a fighting game character. I want to go back to assisting cooking granny in the cooking game. And another character's like, well, what you do is just beat all the other characters, and then you'll become so OP that they have to nerf you. And then eventually they'll just boot you from the game. Yep. Because of balancing issues. And it's just like, what the hell is this madness? And I love it.
And that's actually kind of how it works from sequel to sequel, hilariously.
Yeah. Also, Lazarus looks like Shovel Knight. That's funny.
Yeah, he does, now that you mention it. But, oh no, he also kind of has a Warhammer.
Very Warhammer thing. Or sort of generic space marine, but particularly Warhammer.
I especially like how you're talking to characters inside the inn, all sorts of weird stuff. Also, you can actually pick out stuff that doesn't seem to add up, like when you're talking to Weasel Kid, he seems to know Lazarus, but not as the Space Marine, for example. Or he mentions someone called Reginald when he finds something down in the basement and you haven't actually met that character. It's,
I thought it was Jeremiah.
Oh yeah, Jeremiah, sorry. So that I keep getting those two mixed up, and we'll go more into that later. But the game is just hinting enough that there's a lot you aren't aware of, that the characters are in on, and you're not getting everything you want to get from them from their flashbacks, because their flashbacks are going in a sequential order, but you're only seeing parts of their particular perspective. So there's a lot in their background you're not privy to. Which is interesting way to structure this.
I just like how Danni is still on the call, but she's muted her mic and her headphones, so she can't. Let's take this opportunity to gossip.
No.
I like Danni, and I think she's great. Okay, now you go.
I'm genuinely curious about what Danny's reaction is going to be, because that ending.
I think every year we should play 100% Orange Juice. Just one game between the four of us.
My internet is very bad.
Yeah.
Castle Crash.
It's very bad.
Danni takes cute selfies. So, what was the... So yeah, the third... Yeah, what is it? I had the names out. I think Secrets of Legendaria.
Final Fantasy, JRPG sort of...
Yeah, the one where it starts off with you having to kill the Moogle because it won't let you exit the tutorial, and the chat freaks out because you're playing this part as someone streaming the game. That was such a good joke, and there's like...
Every time you level up after an RPG fight, it just zooms out, and you see this Twitch chat being like, "Holy shit! Well done!"
And I love when you get to parts where you have to answer questions and the chat's just giving answers, and there's moderators in the chat banning people giving answers.
How does it actually...
And again, it goes off your Steam friends, because there was somebody who I used to know on Screw Attack. And I was like, they're telling me the answers, and then they get banned, and then they come back and say like, "It's me, I got an alt." And everyone starts chanting like, #free his name.
That's great.
Oh, it's so amazing.
It's amazing how well they understand the video game fans. And you also like...
Yeah, it's just the fact...
I also like that all the parodies in this game are loving parodies.
Oh, definitely.
They're not just shitting on things. Like even Chapter 6, which is a big parody of the Beginner's Guide, it's using it in a clever way where it's not making fun of the Beginner's Guide, but using what the Beginner's Guide was to further build on its story and make its points and all that. So yeah, that's neat.
I just like how in that same boss fight where the Twitch chat helps you out, it's because you get a few questions at first that are quite obvious, and then it's when it's like, "What is the Sphinx's name?" And you're like, "I don't know," and then the Twitch chat just appears like, "I know, it's this."
Okay, I'm back.
Did you find Yay! Did you find the Anks genuinely, or did you use the glitch Ank as a question?
I picked up every genuine Ankh until I found the glitched one, then I just got punched.
I picked up all the real Anks, and like 2 levels later in the Vicious Galaxy segment, when you run into the fountain or something, if you gave it the glitched Ank, it fights you in a boss fight. And if you don't, it just says, "Hey, thanks for the Anks." You can just go straight through.
It's a good game. And I should also mention, before we get more into spoilers, into the spoiler section, that there is more extra stuff outside of this game that's kind of hidden in this game. It's wild. So like, there's already it's not, the community around this isn't as big as it was for Pony Island, but it's still fairly sizable, and they found some wild shit.
We haven't even gone beneath the surface. Wink, wink.
Should we go ahead and get into spoilers for this one?
Yeah.
We pretty much need to get into chapter 4 and onwards, so yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, my headphones fell out. Oh, my headphones are back in. Sorry, I'm moving around.
No moving.
Desist to the moving.
Alright, let's get into spoilers, and I'm honestly curious how Danny reacted to that ending. Okay, so, we're gonna work our way to the what the fuck ending, but, so let's go ahead and start with what happens in each chapter. Chapter 1, simple, it's, with Weasel Kid, it's going through his games, he has a Sonic 06 moment, when his third game is made by an outside company he got sold to. His, mentor, apparently dies, I think his name was Mr. Gopher or something like that.
Yeah.
Mr. Shroud.
Mr. Shrewd, that's it. Because he's a shrew.
Yeah.
And he gets replaced by a guy who are called Mr. Squirrel, who's very rude. But
Rossetti, basically.
And the game's like heavily hinting that he has something to do with something. But if you actually go out and figure out what that is through a contrived series of things throughout the first 3 chapters and then ending it with the 4th chapter, you find out that he was Mr. Shrew's partner and was in a deep depression, and if you go through this, you actually help him find closure. So I didn't expect that. Good on you, game. Chapter 2 is with Bryce, and you see the face of that game company that made the terrible Weasel game. I think they're called GameWorks or something like that.
Yeah.
GameWorks.
Let's see, they're...
With Irving.
Yes, Irving. Irving is basically the character in charge of... He's sort of like an... just basically a middleman business dude who puts everyone in their place and gets them to do their role as a video game character. And he forces Bryce to become a game character because that's what Lionel wants. And that entire chapter is about Bryce trying to get back to his cooking game. He does at the end because he becomes too OP by beating Sato, who we'll get into more in a bit. And And his story ends in a way that actually got me to feel something I wasn't expecting, where you're basically forced to hit cooking grandma and destroy his life, and it's actually kind of heartbreaking. He just wanted to be a chef. And then in Chapter 3, you finally get to see a perspective from a character who does not want to be in the role she's been given with Chandrele. We find out later it was made by a girl that Lionel was that clearly had a crush on, was also a complete dick to, who was working at his company that he knew for a while. So amazing. And she also made Sato, so that's starting to put some pieces together. But Chandrele basically is doing everything she can to escape her now launching game Secret of Legenda by conspiring with the main villain of the game. I think he's Valdemar or something like that, and who's just this gross ghost blob thing who farts and makes gross comments about everything. And he has a really farty music,
so
which I appreciated.
And
You get your first story twist in this part, where you discover that Lazarus is from this game and is not a space marine at all, but some sort of swordsman who's a part of Chandrele's party. And that got my gears turning, and things get even weirder when suddenly you're forced to, later on in this game, you're forced to play two different genres at the same time. As Lionel appears, Chandrele was also in the fighting game with Bryce. And he's basically aware, and sorry, not Lionel, I meant Irving. And he's aware that Chandrele is trying to break from her role and is trying to stop her. And you end up in a situation where, along with doing the turn-based combat, you also have to control Chandrele as a fighting game character and fight him. And it was such a wild moment that suddenly made me realize there's going to be a lot more going on in this game. Long story short, Chandrele succeeds in helping Valimir win, and the game world gets all fucked up, and the stream chat loses its mind. And then she ends up in a bad place from there, and Lazarus end up to becoming the Space Marine in the game Vicious Galaxy, which is sort of where they send the particularly undesirable characters, from what I gather. And then you get to Chapter 4 and shit gets wild. Wow. So because Rust is from a game called Wasteworld that was never finished, he doesn't know he's a video game character. And so when all the mod stuff starts happening, shit gets weird really, really fast. It's like there's suddenly aliens in his world when he was just used to fighting people with robots. There's weird giant monsters and
aliens that can't spell.
Yeah.
And shout, "We are going to bone you."
Because, modders. And
and Rust is just like, what the heck?
And then Sato appears. Oh boy.
Oh.
And things go bad quickly from there. He ends up, his son in the game ends up just disappearing for some reason he's not sure of. And he basically loses his mind, and the game constantly starts switching through genres and bizarre settings. The main gameplay is strategy game, except you actually have access to mods and can use cheats, but only a set number at a time. So this forces you, two, and it forces you to think of everything like a puzzle, which is cool. But things get progressively weirder the closer to the end of the chapter you get, to the point he's and it's implied it's all because of Sato, but it's not entirely sure. But basically, he finds himself at the end, his world basically in shambles and him with no place, which is, of course, where you find him at the beginning of the game, not really aware that he's a video game character and talking about knifing a character from the game he came from. And then Chapter 5 is where the bombshells happen, as you finally get to understand what's going on with Lazarus, and God, the reveal is so good. It starts out like a Hotline Miami, a mix of Hotline Miami and top-down twin-stick shooter. And the Hotline Miami section even has similar music, which I liked. and you're basically going around fighting aliens. There's one point where a bunch of aliens seem to surrender, which is bizarre, and you have the choice of killing them or not doing anything, and then your partner does it. And eventually it's revealed that you, the player, have been lied to, and that Lazarus and his group has been purposely obfuscating what you've been saying, and they're actually attacking the GameWorks area and have been killing the various characters from the games you've been playing. And that's where the existential stuff really hits in the high gear, and it turns out they're trying to destroy GameWorks from the inside and gain their freedom. And it leads to probably the coolest gameplay segment in the whole game, where you have to switch between the top-down sections and Lazarus' original 2D RPG Zelda-style gameplay in order to travel through and escape. It's kind of brilliant in the way it's set up and how it's executed, but it was a little difficult for me the first time.
I'd totally play an entire game in that sort of form.
Chapter 6...
Is that good?
Welcome to Evoland 2.
As Danny alluded to before, Chapter 5 ends with Lazarus basically being set up by the innkeeper to find a firearm, which he uses to kill Irving. And then the innkeeper's like, hey, were you satisfied by that? And of course I wasn't, because I paid close attention to what was going on and realized not a lot was actually explained. And so I selected no, and at that point you are allowed to play as ... And he is a game character with no personality of his own. He can't even speak, as far as I can tell. He always just has ellipses in his speech bubbles. And then you get to go through his game, Walk, which, as you can guess, is a walkabout exploration game entirely narrated by the creator of all these games, Lionel. It's a beginner's guide style parody, a loving parody, if not one like saying take that beginner's guide, but it's using the same structure to build on the themes and ideas this game's playing with, and you basically have to listen to Lionel go on and on about his own personal shit and how he made these games and all that, and you kind of hate him very quickly. Because it turns out Lionel is an egotistical asshole who is just the absolute worst human being. Just the worst. And you get a lot of little tidbits if you explore around, like discovering the reason Mr. Shrew was killed off was because he was based on a pet Lionel had that died at a similar time, for example. You get an idea of how he makes games, how GameWorks fits into it. And you also learn something very interesting about that woman who made Sato I mentioned earlier, because there's a pentagram right next to her fucking computer in the game office when you're traveling through Walk, which shows you real places that Lionel's been in his life, which suggests this game might be in canon with Pony Island, which is the funniest thing ever to me. But basically, she has been purposely sabotaging Lionel's games. It's not said here. We'll explain in further detail, but that's the implication as things go wrong for him. Like her character, Chandra Lay, who she made for the fighting game, because she wanted more female characters in it, ended up getting her own game, and, well, you all know how that turned out. Of course, you have, and then Sato is basically just sort of a bug that travels from game to game throughout all of Lionel's work, and he seems to be aware of it and it's driving him crazy. And you also realize that while his first two Weasel games were good, and he felt somewhat satisfied with the fighting game, everything else has been kind of a disaster for him. And by the time he's doing Waste World, he's completely cut off from his company. He did not pay any of his employees as it closed down, and was trying to prove he could do things on his own in his own self-obsessed way. And nope, it had to be finished by modders. And the reason the game broke down in Chapter 4 was because he got so pissed off that modders were trying to finish his game, the game that he wanted to put his creative stamp on. He decided to cease and desist and just destroy the thing forever. And of course he ends up just going on this long egotistical diatribe about how everyone is wrong but him and how he's going to prove everyone wrong. And then you get a choice at the end where you can either go on the stage as he asks you to, in order to just finish his game, but someone else has programmed something within the game. So if you go to the side, you can learn about what's actually happening and discover that Weasel Kid was not the first game Lionel made, and probably one of the coolest segments in the game. And you discover he made a little Tapper clone with, of course, the innkeeper, who is named, which one is Reginald and which one was Jeremiah? I forget.
Jeremiah's the janitor, and the innkeeper's Root Beer
That's
Reggie.
right, he was Root Beer Reggie, the main character of this game, this cute little game he put up for free somewhere. And then Irving comes in while you're playing it, and is basically trying to hide the fact this game existed because Lionel is embarrassed by it, and viciously beats up Root Beer Reggie, so he has to be stuck in a wheelchair like you find him at the beginning of the game. And of course Jeremiah is the janitor in the Tapper game. And it's this really cool segment where the entire screen is breaking apart, the soundtrack is breaking apart, and then it eventually cuts back to the inn, and you discover that all the characters you've been playing as have been deceiving you, just like they did in Chapter 5, and are trying to open a portal to the real world so they can kill Lionel as revenge and to gain their freedom, and they need you, the player, to finish this for them. And so you do, and then you see the actual Lionel get fucking choked to death from a hand coming out of his TV screen, and a scene that is way more effective than it probably should have been for such a silly concept. And I was like, well, that's definitely one of the best games I played in 2018. Just everything about building up to that reveal is so perfectly handled, and like how the game gets you to kind of agree with the game characters about what a shit this guy is by seeing all the stuff they've gone through and how he's been acting. And then it twists the knife if you choose to look further into it, because there are like hidden games and data files in this, and if you go through and search for one, you discover that Lionel was trying to apologize to his creations, but they didn't find out. So whoops, no redemption.
That's one thing I wouldn't say I disagree with you on it, but if you had to qualify how evil the characters in the game were, Irving is the one who's like the representative of GameWorks, who are kind of the whole company of Lionels, but they're intentionally Lionels.
Oh yeah.
And the way that Sado tortures, well, you know, with a name like Sado, what do you expect? The way that she tortures Rust, she's clearly not even if her goal is just to ruin Lionel's games, she's clearly something quite worse than that. And did you see the stinger?
Hang on, we should mention that Sado was also imprisoned in Chapter 5, suggesting that not even the characters in the game really like Sado, and she is basically just an outside influence that nobody actually wants there.
I assume she was just a virus.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep. But did you see the stinger at the end, after the credits?
Refresh my memory.
Lionel is dead on his desk, and then Sado slowly rises
I remember
into
that.
the frame in real life. So the three villains of the game are kind of Irving, Sado, and Lionel, and Lionel would definitely not be the worst of them. He's an absolute jackass.
But it's also implied that Reggie is kind of the same, because he's manipulating you, and he seems to be manipulating all the other characters, especially Rust, on some level, just for his revenge, not for their freedom. So it's just basically this giant complicated mess where these game characters were intensely mistreated by the person who created them, but also felt the wrath of a completely different person who also hated Lionel through Sado, and it just piled up. and the only way they could actually find any sort of freedom for themselves and not live by this egotistical knob's whims was basically just to end him. And of course, that makes the outside game twist all the more biting, because then you realize he was honestly trying to make amends in some way.
That was another thing about Carla, because Carla creates Sado while Lionel is working on Combat Arena
Yeah, and for
X.
Combat Arena X.
And by that point, he is still a massive jackass, and he's a horrible
and
boss to her.
sexist.
But she creates a virus that goes on to ruin his career and then has a possible connection to his death.
Keep in mind that she probably doesn't know that video game characters are real because she's a human being.
That is fair.
And she also had a pentagram on her wall suggesting that she dabbled in forces she didn't understand. Pony-loving forces who are bad at making video games.
Should I do the beneath the surface thing? Because this was the last fourth wall break, the final kind of...
Go ahead.
Alternate reality game thing. So, months after the game came out, somebody found that there is there's something hidden deep in the files of the Hex if you had to get some lines of code, and it translates as a text chat between Lionel and Carla, shortly before his presumed death, where he kind of apologizes, but he's also just asking her to put something in one of the games that she releases. And after a lot of pausing, she eventually agrees, but then blocks him. And then people found a free game on Steam named Beneath the Surface, which is just a funny little jokey fishing simulator. And it's uploaded by a company named Carla51 or something. And if you open it up and type in lionel.exe, it takes you to an alternate cut of Walk, where Lionel is talking about how, I feel kind of bad about this, but Weasel Kid wasn't my first game. I made this one named, what was it, Root Beer Reggie? He was the character. I based him on my granddad, because I always kind of liked him, and But then when Weasel Kid came out, I didn't want this old game to be, cheapening my reputation. So the GameWorks people told me that they'd take care of it. I don't know what they did, but if Reggie's out there, I'm sorry. I miss you.
Whoops.
The end. Oh, and then the game crashes, and then suddenly the background of your desktop turns into multiple images of Sado, and then it just says, downloading Sado.exe complete.
Oh.
Hooray!
That's fear-inducing.
I'm very masochistia.
Yep.
I like this game.
I feel like we just explained, we literally just explained the plot of the game. That's what.
I kind of like how while Pony Island was just a piss take, all of this is taken seriously. It's not played as a joke. There's some humor in it, no, it's treating all these silly named characters as actual living things that should be respected for who they are. Even Mr. Squirrel gets an arc of his own if you're willing to look for it, and it's well done. It's not played as a joke at all. I was impressed by that.
Remember in Heaven Will Be Mine, when we were 90 minutes into the discussion, and I finally realised the most obvious metaphor? We're 92 minutes into the Hex, and I'm like, hey, wait a minute! Maybe GameWorks and Irving represent the commodification of original properties by small creators and the cheapening, enslavement, or destruction at their hands of capitalist business models.
You got it!
Yay!
We solved video gaming.
One of these days, I'm gonna learn something. Oh god, what if Roller Coaster Tycoon is actually about something really deep and I've been missing it this entire time?
It's not.
What if it
About
is,
the fleeting enjoyment of existence. And roller coasters.
1 second you want a roller coaster, the next, station breaks failure.
Danny, what did you think of that ending when you looked it up on YouTube?
I honestly don't feel like it was too different from the one that I got, because it was because it was about you getting, like, I mean, that time in the true ending, it was Lionel being killed, not GameWorks. But I thought the sentiment was the same. It was like,
well, yeah.
It was like the player being manipulated to kill the people in charge of these games.
The difference here is that basically their plan was to kill both the representative of GameWorks to be free of them, but also Lionel. But the difference is how they go about doing that second one, where it's way more personal. I think you would have to experience the entirety of Walk to really get the full impact, because you learn just so much of Lionel, in fact too much, that you kind of side with the characters, like, yeah, go ahead and kill this guy.
I understood them, but I wouldn't say I sided with them. It's more like, mainly just because GameWorks were clearly like the intentionally bad guys. GameWorks were EA, and Lionel was like, I don't know, Dennis Dyack or someone.
Well, yeah, but you've also seen how his egotistical decisions have actually affected characters in the game, especially when you find out about Mr. Shrew in his world and realize that's why Mr. Shrew died and why his partner's so miserable now, and why Weasel Kid's life started to unravel. It was just all because of a bad decision he made in a bad place. And you realize, and of course with his interactions with Carla and how he treats the people in his company, you realize he's just a self-obsessed user. Even if you get that final bit where he wants to make amends with Reggie, he's a self-obsessed user that can only really hurt people, and he hasn't really figured out or grown enough to stop being so self-destructive and outwardly destructive.
But then, much like Carla, I don't think he knows that video games are real.
Oh yeah.
So there is an element of like, he killed off Mr. Shrewd, and then I just think, well, man, those Spec Ops devs, they killed off fucking loads of people in horrible ways.
It's more
women and children.
It's more in a way that he is an apathetic god who doesn't realize that he is a god, and you realize that these characters aren't actually going to be able to live their lives peacefully as long as he exists to control them. And the same goes for GameWorks, which is why both of them had to die. I'm smart.
That's fair.
Alan Wake 3, baby. Honestly, I love meta stories like this that take the absurdity of that concept and go completely serious with it, because there's a lot you can read into about just how not just the horrifying concept of this, but what it says about people in general. And it brings up a lot of interesting moral questions. It brings up a lot of questions about creative and professional responsibility, and just, I was genuinely impressed where it ended up going all this time, and especially with all the presentation tricks, like how loud the noise and sound got in the last ending, and just how overwhelming everything became as you try to get your head back together and figure out just exactly what you're experiencing right now and its ramifications. Like, it's a wonky idea, but it's executed so well that I didn't care how illogical some of the ideas were. And I also appreciated all the little details, like the one character who keeps coming back in every chapter is the little fox person who like runs the item shop, for example. The only one who gets to, no, like the only one Lionel still has control over by the end. And she's just like, this is all bullshit, man. Why am I the lead character now? I was running an item shop. I like little stuff like that.
I just realised that there's, like, in-universe canonical explanations for all of the game crashes as well.
Yep.
Because in Combat Arena X and Wasteworld, it's because the way you crash those is essentially by cheating or trying to beat Sado. If you try and delete Sado in Wasteworld, the whole game just goes down.
That's great.
And in Super Weasel Kid, it's just implied that it's a really shittily made game.
Yeah.
So there's just naturally a game-breaking bug in there.
And there's just so much good attention to detail, and all the extra endings you can get are really good. I like if you let Valdemar go in after he's released from Chandelay's head. It just ends the world, and he gives you a little messages. The entire screen goes purple at the end, and the farty music starts playing. That was good.
I'm trying to think of like the definitive the Hex moment, and
Lionel's
even
death.
though it's not my favourite moment, I just like the bit in the RPG where it's like, okay, if we want to get to the boss, we can go up and fight all these creatures, or we can just go left. I'm pretty sure the devs didn't properly code the wall. And if you walk left, you just go to another screen, and the text just says, "Oh, fuck you, Lionel." Cutting my hours again.
That's good. It's a good game. Yeah, go play the Hex, everybody. We just spoiled it all in this section. But I don't know what I'm saying anymore.
This needs to be played too. This is an experience, this game.
Yeah.
That's the only negative thing I have to say about it isn't anything about the Hex at all. It's just that Pony Island is very much, you watch someone play it for 10 minutes, you get the gist, it's the kind of thing where, like, PewDiePie would play it, and his fans would go, "Ooh, that looks cool." And the Hex is like, I don't want to be all, it's a lot more refined.
It is.
Only seasoned intellectuals could understand it. But it's just that it should be at least as famous as Pony Island. It's really, really, really good.
Yeah.
I feel like I just played Return of the Obra Dinn after Papers, Please, only I found out that Return of the Obra Dinn got like a 6 out of 10 and no one ever heard of it. It's just that kind of like, hey,
I had to make
screw all of you. This is fantastic.
If you want to know how many people slept on this, I was the one who had to make the TV Tropes page months after it came out. Most of what's on that page is me and a few other people added stuff like the outside the game stuff. Yep.
What did you think of it, Tama?
I really enjoyed this game. I think it's sort of one of these games that you need to sort of have a background where you have played a lot of video games, because a lot of the humour is quite the sort of the quite meta, the sort of, I suppose particularly sort of the fantasy sections were like, yeah, this is it's a game that is obviously created by people who enjoy video games, who enjoy video game characters. And obviously, this is a very character-driven piece. And obviously, the characters drive the action. Its characters wish to become real, to become not just an avatar of somebody else playing a game, but, flesh and blood and able to have their own choice and their own identity. That was a particularly interesting topic, an interesting concept within the game. The thing I would compare it to is alongside Rosencrantz and Guildenstern and all those sort of other meta-narrative things. There's a novel by Austin Grossman, who wrote the superhero novel Soon I Will Be Invincible, called You, and You basically does, the idea of a lot of particularly with really hardcore gamers, of sort of, the characters that we play as become part of ourselves. I'm pretty sure all of us can sort of say, there is a video game character where playing as that video game character and experiencing their story changed us. Yeah, and it's sort of an interesting thing to sort of then go, well, what happens to, these video game characters when we finish playing the game? Or what happens to them, particularly in an unfinished game? Because there are all these characters there with untold stories. I mean, if we go back to the beginning of this episode, there's all these characters in Barkley too that we're never going to...
Barkley, shut up and chat.
Yeah, that we're never going to get to meet. And it's a very interesting game to sort of, to float around character and go, obviously from an entirely meta-narrative point of view, is, these characters that we play are these other lives that we take part... that we take part in, as video gamers, sort of start before we start their story and end, in a sort of an interesting, and it's an interesting way to approach character in video game and genre in video game that I don't think many creators have ever done before.
If you're listening to this, buy art school and go into art school and draw some fan art of the cast of Barkley, Shut Up and Jam Gaiden 2 in the 6 Pint Inn, just having a laugh with the rest of the characters.
Go do that now.
Vice is cooking them pies. The question marks guy, someone gave him like an Etch-a-Sketch so he can communicate with the others, and they're all just having a good time. I will give the best one £5 British.
Or a copy of Roller Coaster Tycoon.
Yes, that.
Give me American money.
Yes. $2.
Brexit has hit us hard.
I have been keeping track of the exchange rate.
But no, I greatly enjoyed this. Thank you for selecting this, Elmo.
No problem. Yeah, I picked a good game.
Well done.
That never happens.
It does.
Alright, Danny's having tech issues, so she won't be able to close with us, but she also won't be here for the next episode since she'll be in Japan doing something of Love Live related or something. I don't know. But Tomo gets the next pick. What are we playing next?
We are playing next time one of the most famous games ever made. It's
Roller Coaster Tycoon.
It's a game from 1993.
Mm-hmm.
Roller Coaster Tycoon.
Originally released on PC and made by ID Software. We are playing Doom.
Commander Keen.
What is it? ID Software released a lot of stuff. Come on.
The silence speaks for itself.
Are we playing Doom? Wait, was Doom 93?
Tama?
Guys, where's everyone
Oh
gone?
no, it's happened again.
Tama's been dragged to hell. We gotta
The nightmare
suit
becomes
up and
reality.
go get him
Oh,
back.
I just fell out of course, sorry. The magnificence of my pronunciation was such that the call dropped. We're playing Doom.
Way!
Okay.
Doomfist.
Doom.
That was terrible.
Ooh.
Edit that out.
Blizzard Entertainment is a garbage company.
Ooh. Oh, right. Sorry, like right at the beginning of the episode with my Hex opening, I said that one of my co-hosts was planning a murder. It was all of us, and we shot Ben Shapiro with a gun labelled climate change, and the bullet was labelled economic uncertainty, and he was wearing a hat labelled Dodgy Steve.
But
He's
which
dead
one
now.
was dead?
Damn it! I always forget
His
about the
blood is
death.
dead.
And we end there. We can't now.
Okay.
Damn it! Someone find an ending spot for this hell of a podcast.
Doom!
That'll do.
John Carmack reads a lot of porn. Okay, we end there.